Penny Langford nearly choked on her lukewarm coffee when the woman on the other end of the phone said, "Congratulations, Miss Langford, you've won a 5-night stay at La Selva Estate, the most exclusive luxury hotel in Costa Rica." Wait, what? Penny blinked at the floor of the tiny bookstore where she worked, half convinced it was a prank. "I didn't enter any contest. You filled out a raffle card at the coffee shop on 6th Street last month. You were chosen randomly," the woman replied, her voice cheerful and professional. Penny vaguely remembered scribbling her name on a card while waiting for her latte, never thinking anything would come of it. "And it's free, completely complimentary," the woman confirmed. "Courtesy of the hotel's anonymous sponsor, all expenses paid. You just need to say yes." Penny glanced around the cramped, used bookstore where the air conditioner didn't work and the phone lines buzzed like bees. It had been a long year too, actually. Her mom had passed, she drained her savings helping with medical bills, and her dreams of grad school were shelved somewhere between the dusty classics. A free luxury vacation. She'd be insane to say no. "I'm in," she said, barely above a whisper. 3 weeks later, Penny stepped off a private transfer van, staring wide-eyed at the towering gates of La Selva Estate. The jungle-framed hotel didn't look real, it was like something from a movie. Vines climbed up pale stone walls, golden light glowed from arched windows, and uniformed staff waited with trays of champagne. She was handed a glass before she could even speak. "Miss Langford, welcome to paradise," said a woman in a crisp white dress. "We hope your stay is unforgettable." Penny's room was bigger than her entire apartment. Marble floors, a private infinity pool, a bed that looked like royalty had slept in it. She stood in the middle of the room, stunned. "I don't belong here," she whispered to herself. "Excuse me." "Did you say something?" She spun around and nearly dropped her glass. The man standing in her open doorway looked like he had walked off the cover of a fashion magazine. Dark hair, sharp jawline, olive skin, a tailored shirt that hugged his broad chest. His eyes sea glass green locked on hers. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm Gabriel Grant. I own the hotel." "Oh, hi." Penny immediately felt out of place in her $19 dress. "I'm Penny Langford." I won the raffle thing." "I know," he said, stepping inside like he belonged there. "I sponsor the raffle." "Oh," she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, thanks, I guess this place is ridiculous." "In a good way?" he asked, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pulling back the sheer linen curtain. "In a this-can't-be-real way," he chuckled. "It's real and you deserve it," she blinked. "You don't know me," Gabriel turned, his gaze sharp. "I know enough. You work full-time, help people, and you've never taken a real vacation. You have a library card, a chipped phone screen, and you didn't list any social media on your raffle entry." Her eyebrows shot up. "You Googled me." "No, I read your raffle card. It was handwritten." "You wrote, 'I've never won anything, but I figured why not? That's the kind of person who deserves to win.'" Penny stared at him, unsure what to say. Gabriel smiled softly. "Anyway, I just wanted to welcome you personally. If you need anything at all, my team will take care of it." "Thanks," she said, a little breathless. Gabriel nodded once, then turned to leave but hesitated at the door. "You should join me for dinner tonight. The chef's doing a tasting menu on the rooftop." Penny blinked. "You're inviting me to dinner?" "You're my guest," he said. "And I never miss a good meal." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, sure." When Gabriel left, Penny collapsed onto the bed, heart pounding. What had just happened? That evening, she dressed in a silky black dress provided by the hotel, still with the tag on, no price. There was even a note. "For tonight." Gee, she wore it. The rooftop was lit with lanterns and candles, the night sky above them glittering with stars. Gabriel stood at the edge, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who never had to try too hard. When he saw her, his eyes softened. "I was hoping you'd wear that one," she laughed nervously. "You picked it." "I own the boutique on the property. I had them send over a few things." "Right," she muttered, sitting as staff pulled out her chair. The dinner was unreal 12 courses, each one more incredible than the last. Gabriel was charming, attentive, and always watching her like she was the most interesting thing in the room. "I still don't get why you're being so nice to me," she said finally, sipping from a glass of wine that probably cost more than her rent. "Because I can," he said simply. "And because I wanted to." She studied him. "What's your deal?" "You run this whole place." "I built it," he said, looking out at the jungle. 10 years ago, this was just trees and dreams. Now it's the most exclusive resort in the country." "That sounds like a line from a brochure," he laughed. "Maybe, but it's true." Penny tilted her head. "So you're like..." "Rich," Gabriel's eyes sparkled. "I'm a billionaire, Penny," she blinked. "You just say it like that. I'm not going to pretend I'm not, but trust me, money doesn't impress me. People do." Her heart thudded. "And I impress you?" Gabriel leaned closer, his voice low. "You fascinate me." Silence stretched between them, hot and electric. Penny looked down at her plate. "This is a lot." "I know," he said, "but it's just dinner, right?" She looked up and met his eyes. "Yeah, just dinner," but it didn't feel like just dinner. Not when he walked her back to her suite and paused at her door. Not when he tucked a piece of hair behind her ear and said, "Sleep well, Penny." Not when she closed the door and leaned against it, breathless and blushing, and definitely not when she realized she was grinning like a fool. Because billionaires didn't fall for bookstore girls. But Gabriel Grant had just looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. The next morning, Penny woke to the soft rustle of the ocean breeze through her open balcony doors and the scent of something sweet wafting in from the terrace. She padded out barefoot, still in the hotel robe, and found a tray of warm croissants, tropical fruit, and a delicate porcelain cup of espresso waiting on the table. A folded card sat beside the plate, no signature, just a simple note: "Start your day slowly. You deserve it." She didn't need a name to know who it was from. By late morning, Penny wandered the winding stone paths of the resort, which felt more like a secret kingdom than a hotel. She passed koi ponds, open-air lounges carved from pale sandstone, and groves of orchids so vivid they didn't seem real. Everything around her whispered of wealth and quiet power, but she couldn't shake the feeling that, despite the grandeur, she was being watched, though not in a threatening way. She rounded a corner near a hidden garden and nearly collided with a tall woman in a tailored navy jumpsuit. The woman adjusted her sunglasses and gave Penny a once-over that wasn't exactly rude, but certainly not warm. "You're the Raffle guest?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Yes," Penny replied, unsure why she suddenly felt like she was being grilled. "Interesting," the woman said, though she didn't sound particularly interested. "I'm Elise, Gabriel's head of operations." Penny offered a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." Elise's eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't take this the wrong way, but you should understand that Gabriel doesn't usually entertain guests personally." "I didn't ask him to." "I'm sure you didn't," Elise replied, voice smooth as glass. "But just be aware he's generous with everyone." "It doesn't mean anything." Penny held her gaze, heat rising up her neck. "I wasn't under any illusions." "Good." Elise stepped aside. "Enjoy your stay." As Penny walked away, she couldn't help the knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't asked for attention. She hadn't come here expecting anything but sunshine and maybe a decent tan. If Gabriel was kind to her, that was his choice. Still, Elise's words clung to her like humidity. Later that afternoon, Penny found herself in the library lounge, a hidden, glass-walled sanctuary nestled on the edge of the property. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held everything from rare first editions to contemporary bestsellers. She ran her fingers along the spines until a voice behind her said, "You found the best room." Gabriel was leaning against the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, a faint trace of salt on his skin like he'd just come from the ocean. "I didn't expect to see you again today," Penny said, trying to sound casual. "I had a meeting cancel," he replied, strolling in. "Besides, this is my favorite place. I come here when I need to think. You have an entire luxury resort. And this is your escape. There's peace in books," he said, pulling one from the shelf and handing it to her. Have you read this? She looked down. A novel she'd always meant to read but never had time for. No, take it, it's yours. That's not necessary. Gabriel tilted his head. Why is it so hard for you to accept something without questioning it? Penny hugged the book to her chest. Because I'm not used to people giving me things without expecting something in return. He walked closer, his voice quiet. Then maybe it's time someone did. They stood in silence, the air thick with something unspoken. She finally looked up. I ran into Elise earlier. I figured you might, he said, no surprise in his voice. She made it clear that you're generous with everyone. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Elise is good at her job, but she doesn't get to define my intentions. And what are those? Penny asked, pulse quickening. He studied her for a long moment. I haven't decided yet. That should have alarmed her. Instead, it thrilled her. Do you always go with your instincts? She asked. I built everything around me by trusting them, he said. But this, he gestured between them, this isn't business. Penny turned toward the window, needing something to anchor herself. This place is like a dream, Gabriel, but I'm not. I'm real. I have rent due on a shoebox apartment and a boss who thinks I'm replaceable. I can't afford to be someone's whim. You're not a whim to me, he said firmly. She didn't respond. That evening, she skipped the resort dinner and wandered the beach instead. The moon painted the waves silver, and for the first time since arriving, she let herself cry. Everything felt too big Gabriel, this place, what she was starting to feel. And she hated how much she wanted it all to be real. She didn't hear the footsteps until he was beside her. I didn't mean to upset you, Gabriel said softly. You didn't, not really, I just needed space. I can give you that, he said, but I won't pretend I don't want to see you again. Penny stared at the horizon. This can't be normal for you, it's not. She turned to face him. Then what do we do now? He reached out and gently took her hand. We walk, we talk, we see where it takes us. And so they did. Along the shoreline, barefoot and quiet, the waves lapping at their ankles, no promises, no expectations. Just the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting honeyed light across the bedroom floor. Penny sat at the edge of the bed, brushing damp hair from her face, her toes curled into the cool tile beneath her. She hadn't slept much. Her mind kept looping through last night on the beach, Gabriel's hand in hers, the way he looked at her like he didn't want the moment to end. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find a young woman in a linen uniform holding a small parcel wrapped in navy paper. This was left for you at the concierge desk, Miss Langford, she said. As soon as the door closed, Penny sat on the bed and unwrapped the box. Inside was a simple gold necklace, delicate and understated, with a single charm in the shape of a tiny compass. A note was tucked beneath it on thick paper, for when you need to find your way. Penny stared at the charm in her palm, the weight of it featherlight and yet somehow grounding. She fastened it around her neck and let it settle against her collarbone before heading out. She walked through the gardens, past the koi pond and into the main courtyard. Guests lounged beneath white umbrellas while staff moved like dancers, seamless and silent. Penny felt the tension in her shoulders return. She didn't blend in here, not with the guests wearing designer sunglasses and whispering in multiple languages. Good, a voice said behind her. You wore it. Gabriel stood with his hands in his pockets, the sun lighting the edge of his face. He wore casual slacks and a short-sleeved button-up, his usual polish softened by the warm air. She turned to face him, one hand brushing the charm at her neck. I wasn't sure if I should. You didn't have to, he said. But I hoped you would. He gestured for her to follow and led her down a stone path she hadn't noticed before. They crossed a narrow wooden footbridge suspended over a ravine. On the other side, the path opened into a private terrace cut into the cliffside, with nothing but ocean and sky beyond. I usually come here alone, he said, but today I wanted to share it. Penny stepped closer to the edge, the wind tugging at her hair. It feels like the edge of the world. Gabriel moved beside her. It's where I go when I need to remember what matters. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. Why did you really choose my name? She asked, her voice low but steady. Out of everyone who entered, he studied the horizon for a moment before answering. Because I saw something in your handwriting, she blinked. My handwriting? You pressed harder on the word why not than the rest, like you were daring yourself. Penny exhaled a soft laugh. That's ridiculous. Maybe, he said, but I trust instincts. And I wanted someone here who wasn't chasing status or money. You didn't even post about it. No selfies, no hashtags. I didn't come here to be seen, she said. I came because I needed to feel something different, even just for a week. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. What if it didn't have to end in a week? Her chest tightened. Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I never say anything I don't mean. She looked away, her voice smaller than she wanted. You don't know me. I want to. They stood there, the silence more intimate than any words. Later that afternoon, Penny found herself in the staff wing, following a map Gabriel had drawn for her on a napkin. He'd told her about the estate's greenhouse, and she'd mentioned how much she missed her mother's garden. He said, "Then you need to see this." What she found was a glass house tucked into the hillside, bursting with lavender, passionflower, and rare orchids. A gardener looked up from a row of succulents and smiled warmly. "Mr. Grant said you might stop by," she said. "He doesn't usually let anyone in here." "Why?" Penny asked, touching a leaf as delicately as if it might shatter. It was his mother's. She designed every inch of it before she passed. "He keeps it exactly as she left it." Penny froze. "She passed years ago," the woman said gently. "He doesn't speak about it much, but he comes here often, to remember." Penny moved to a wrought iron bench near the center. The air inside smelled like jasmine and earth. She sat for a long time, fingers resting against the compass charm. Something had shifted. Gabriel wasn't just the impossibly wealthy man who had built a luxury empire. He was someone carrying grief quietly in spaces no one else saw. That night, she was invited to a private dinner in a glass pavilion overlooking the water. Only a handful of guests were their investors, Gabriel had said, though he hadn't required her to join. But when she arrived, he met her at the door. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. He offered his arm and she took it. The evening was elegant without being stiff. Candlelight shimmered across crystal glasses, the sea framed by the pavilion's curved glass walls. But Penny couldn't help noticing the way people looked at her, curious, calculating. She kept her posture graceful, her responses polite. As dessert was cleared, a man with silver hair leaned toward Gabriel. "So, is she the reason you've been distracted lately?" Gabriel's eyes flicked briefly toward Penny, then back to the man. "She's the reason I've been focused." Afterward, as the guests mingled and soft jazz filled the space, Penny stepped out onto the terrace to breathe. The sound of waves crashing below grounded her. Gabriel joined her moments later, his jacket draped over one shoulder. "I didn't mean to put you under a microscope tonight," he said. "You didn't," she replied. "But I think some of your guests were trying to figure out why I'm here." He leaned on the railing beside her. "Let them guess." She studied his profile, the way the moonlight traced the curve of his jaw. "You don't care what they think, I care what you think." Penny's throat tightened. "I think I'm starting to forget where my real life ends and this one begins." He turned to face her. "Then let's make a new one." She shook her head, not out of rejection but disbelief. "You don't even know where I'm from. Tell me." "I was born in a town with 2 stoplights and a diner that still uses paper menus. I went to state school, I read too much, I talk in my sleep, and I get nervous when people buy me expensive things." Gabriel stepped closer. "I grew up in a high-rise with glass walls and a mother who believed money could protect you from everything. It couldn't. I built this place to prove I could create something beautiful on my own terms. But the truth is, I've been surrounded by luxury my whole life and none of it has ever felt as real as you." Penny's breath caught. Gabriel wasn't offering her a fantasy. He was offering her a choice. Her heart thudded. "I don't know what happens next." His voice was quiet. "Neither do I. But I want to find out together." And somehow, despite everything, that didn't terrify her, it thrilled her. Rain drummed softly against the glass as Penny stood barefoot in the greenhouse, her fingertips brushing over the petals of a dusky pink anthurium. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of earth, but it wasn't the storm outside that had her heart racing. She was waiting. She'd barely slept the night before. After Gabriel's confession on the terrace, her mind had spiraled through every possibility. She could stay lost in this world of luxury and growing affection, or she could return to her life in the city, where her future was predictable, safe, and entirely uninspired. But when she turned and saw him standing at the entrance, his shirt clinging to his chest from the rain, she knew. "You're soaked," she said, walking toward him. "I was hoping the rain would stop," he replied. "It didn't. You could have waited." "I didn't want to." Gabriel stepped inside, water pooling around his shoes, but he didn't seem to care. His eyes were fixed on her, unreadable but intense. "I need to ask you something," he said. She hesitated. "Okay." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, worn at the edges, not new, not flashy. It surprised her. "I've had this for a few years," he said. "I bought it the day my mother passed. Not because I had anyone in mind, but because I wanted to believe that one day I would." Penny felt her breath catch. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said. "Not yet. I'm asking if you're willing to stay with me. Not in the resort, not as a guest, as my partner in every way. I want to build something real with you." "You don't even know what I'm like when I'm stressed," she whispered. "Then let me find out. I leave tea bags in the sink. I run meetings barefoot. I cry when I read sad books. I build gardens to grieve people I miss." Penny laughed softly, tears threatening. "You don't make this easy." "I don't want easy, I want honest." "I want you." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "And if I stay, what happens to my life, my job, my apartment?" Gabriel reached for her hand. "We'll figure it out. I'll fly you back to pack what you want. You can keep the lease if you need the safety net. I'll never pressure you to be someone else, but I can't let you leave without knowing I want a real life with you, not just a vacation." She stared at him, her fingers tightening around his. "This isn't a fantasy to you?" "No," he said. "It's the most real thing I've had in years." She took a deep breath. "I've spent so long trying to prove I can stand on my own. I didn't think I'd meet someone who wanted to stand beside me." Gabriel's voice was low. "You don't have to prove anything to me. You already have." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Inside, she leaned up and kissed him, slow, deliberate, and sure. Later that evening, Penny stood in front of the full-length mirror in Gabriel's private suite, wearing a gown unlike anything she'd ever owned. It was gifted to her that afternoon, sent without a note, but she knew it was his way of marking the moment. The fabric shimmered like moonlight, hugging her figure without trying too hard. She was still herself, but elevated. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his tie loose around his neck, watching her with quiet reverence. "You look like my future," he said. She smiled. "You clean up all right yourself." He extended his hand. "Come with me." He led her to the lower gardens, where a private dinner had been arranged under a canopy of fairy lights strung through ancient trees. A pianist played soft music somewhere out of sight, and a long table was set for two. Candles flickered in cut glass holders. The scent of jasmine floated on the breeze. Penny's eyes widened. "You did all this?" "I wanted our first night as us to be unforgettable." They sat, and between courses of fresh seafood and fruit soaked in sweet wine, they talked. Not about the resort or the raffle or how improbable this was, but about what they wanted next. He told her about a project in the north he wanted her to help name. She told him about a children's book she'd started writing years ago and never finished. Gabriel leaned in. "Finish it here. I'll build you a writing studio. You can't keep solving everything with buildings." "Says who?" he teased. She laughed, then turned serious. "I want to be sure we're building something that lasts." "I do too," he said. "That's why I'm not rushing you. But I'll be here every day, showing you I mean it." Hours later, after the candles had burned low and the music faded into silence, Penny leaned against his chest as they swayed slowly beneath the trees. No one else existed, just the two of them, dancing to a song only they could hear. She pulled back slightly to look at him. "You know, I never win anything." Gabriel smiled down at her. "You didn't win me, you just found me." She shook her head. "No, I found myself here, and because of that I found you too." He kissed her forehead, his voice a promise against her skin. "Welcome home." And just like that, the girl who never expected anything was given a life she didn't dare imagine, not because she won a raffle, but because she opened her heart to something she never saw coming. Together, they built a new story, one rooted in truth, nurtured by trust, and lit by the kind of love that doesn't fade when the vacation ends. A love that, against all odds, felt like it was always meant to be. Gabriel's hand rested lightly on Penny's lower back as they stepped into the villa nestled deep within the estate's southern cliffs. It wasn't on any guest brochure, this one was his personal space, far removed from the curated polish of the main resort. The architecture was clean and modern, but the inside held history: warm wood, hand-thrown pottery, and photographs that clearly hadn't been taken for the press. "You live here," Penny said, her voice soft. He nodded. "It's the first place I built after the hotel. I didn't want a penthouse. I wanted something real." She wandered through the open living space, her fingers brushing a carved mask displayed on the wall. "Did you collect these?" "My mother did. She believed life should be surrounded by stories." Penny turned to him, her gaze searching. "You never mentioned she was an artist." "She was 1,000 things," Gabriel said, stepping toward her. "But yes, she painted, sculpted. She had this wild belief that beauty could fix things that were broken." Was she right? His eyes didn't move from hers. "I didn't believe her until I met you." She reached for his hand, grounding them both. "I don't want to be something you fix." Gabriel's fingers tightened gently around hers. "You're not. You're the first thing that made me stop trying to fix the past." They spent the evening cooking together, barefoot in his kitchen. Penny chopped tomatoes while Gabriel stirred a pot of thick, fragrant sauce. There was flour on the counter, wine in their glasses, and music playing from a scratched record player that crackled at the edges. "You're a terrible singer," she teased as he hummed along. "I'm a billionaire, I don't need to be good at everything." She laughed, tossing a towel at him. "That's not how it works." "It is in my house," he said, catching the towel mid-air. Later, after dinner, they sat curled on the couch, knees touching, a fire flickering low beside them. Penny leaned into him, her head against his chest. "I'm scared," she admitted. Gabriel didn't flinch. "Of what?" "That this is all too much, too fast, that I'll forget who I am." He tilted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then we slow down, we build this together, no clocks, no expectations." "And what do we tell the world?" "Nothing," he said. "We tell the world nothing until we're ready. You don't owe anyone your story but me." Penny's breath caught. "That sounds dangerously close to forever." Gabriel's lips brushed her temple. "It is." Over the next week, the rhythm between them settled into something only they could define. Gabriel carved out time from his empire-canceling meetings, shifting schedules. He brought Penny to the lesser-known corners of the estate, a waterfall that fed the resort's natural springs, a cliffside meditation cove that had once been a pirate lookout, a single mango tree that his mother had planted on her first trip to the land. Each place held a part of him. And he gave them to her, one by one. Penny, in turn, brought her own pieces. She shared a passage from a novel she'd been working on in secret. She taught Gabriel how to cook the pancakes her father used to make every Sunday. She wrote him a list of small things she loved: fresh linen, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the scent of old bookstores. He pinned it to the wall beside his desk. One afternoon, they walked through the employee village, Gabriel's hand in hers. Penny noticed how the staff lit up when they saw him, not with fear but affection. She stopped at a shaded garden where a group of children were painting rocks. "You run a school here?" Gabriel nodded. "Only for the staff's children for now." "My mother would have wanted it." Penny knelt beside a little girl who offered her a brush. "I used to do this with my mom," she said, dipping it into a swirl of blue. Gabriel watched her, his expression unreadable. That night, he brought her to his office where architectural models lined the shelves. "I want to make something with you," he said. "What do you mean, a library? Public, free. On the edge of the property where the town meets the jungle, you choose the name." "I'll build it." Penny's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why me?" "Because you remind me that the world is bigger than luxury, and because you see people, not just profit." She swallowed hard. "Then call it Marigold House," he blinked. "Why? It was my mother's favorite flower." "And mine." He stepped forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "Then that's what it'll be." In the days that followed, they made plans, real ones. Penny contacted her landlord and gave her notice. Gabriel arranged for her things to be shipped. She didn't want to keep the apartment in the city. It no longer felt like home. On her last night before leaving to pack, Gabriel walked her to the helipad at the far edge of the estate. The chopper waited, blades already turning. "I'll be back in 3 days," she said, gripping his hands. "I'll be counting every hour." She hesitated. "Do you think this will still feel real when I'm not standing in paradise?" Gabriel leaned in, his voice fierce and certain. "You're the paradise, Penny." She kissed him then, not rushed, not desperate, just sure. And when she boarded and lifted into the sky, she looked down and saw Gabriel standing exactly where she left him, watching her rise like she was the last thing tethering him to the ground. 3 days later, she returned. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as the woman who had rewritten the rules of her own life. The estate staff greeted her like family. Her new quarters weren't in the guest wing, but in the villa beside Gabriel's, the one he'd designed with 2 offices, a jungle view reading room, and a kitchen just big enough to dance in. That evening, Penny stepped out onto the cliffside terrace in a soft, pale blue dress. Gabriel waited there, holding a single marigold in his hand. He didn't say anything at first, just took in the sight of her like it was the first time. Then quietly he said, "I lied. I don't want to wait." She tilted her head. "For what?" "For forever." He pulled a small ring from his pocket, not flashy, not oversized. A simple gold band engraved with the word "Why not?" The same words she had written on that Raffle card months ago. Penny's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She said yes. And this time when they kissed, it wasn't the beginning of something uncertain. It was the start of a life they'd already begun, one built not on luck or wealth, but on the steady, quiet courage of choosing each other every single day. They married on the edge of the jungle beneath a canopy of marigolds and sky. No press, no spectacle, just the soft strum of guitar, the rustle of wind, and 2 vows spoken with absolute clarity. Penny kept writing, Gabriel kept building. And together, they built a life not defined by extravagance, but by meaning. In the years that followed, Marigold House opened its doors to thousands. Children learned to read beneath its curved wooden beams, and adults found second chances in the stories it held. And on quiet mornings before the world woke, Gabriel and Penny sat on the terrace with coffee and silence, watching the jungle breathe. They never forgot how it began, but they never stopped writing the rest.